Welcome, everyone. This is John Singeri, the Chief Marketing Officer for Active Endpoints, and I'm joined today by Michael Rowley, our Chief Technology Officer. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Our topic today is organizing and searching tasks in a WS-Human Task Worklist System. And let's go through just some quick logistics. If you haven't used GoToWebinar in the past, you'll see on the right-hand side the best environment is to hit that button there, and it'll give you full screen access. And after the presentation, which normally will last 15 or 20 minutes, we'll take questions. And you can see the question box on the right-hand side. In terms of the intent of the CTO Tuesdays, first of all, they're a series. And they're presented Tuesdays at 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Pacific. And they're on specific relevant topics, very technically oriented for what we call the extended development team. What we mean by that are enterprise and application architects, project managers, developers, and those that are just evaluating BPM technologies. We do record these. So if you know people in your company that can't particularly make this one, just go ahead and point them to the address, our website, and they can listen to it in archive mode. So now I'd like to turn it over to Michael.
Thanks, John. Let me bring up the presentation here, just a minute. Okay. Excellent. So first, I'll be talking about the way that you can use the WS-Human Task API and the worklist system that's based on it for organizing tasks, especially customizing the organization of different kinds of tasks. But before getting into that, I'd like to do a quick refresher on what Beeple for People and WS-Human Task are. In 2007, WS Beeple was standardized by Oasis, but although it allowed for the possibility that some of the activities in the process might include tasks done by people, it just assumed, well, those things are going to be represented as if they were web services, and we'll let the vendors figure out how to represent human tasks as if they're web services. So what happened with Beeple for People and WS-Human Task is that there was a new standardization effort started in March 2008. The original submission was authored by Active Endpoints, Adobe, BEA, IBM, Oracle, and SAP. And we worked for a couple of years, and just this past summer, we approved both specifications as Oasis committee specifications. So that's the end of the technical work on the spec. The key concepts from these are, first, in Beeple for People, what that is a standard extension to Beeple where some of the activities are explicitly represented as people activities. And unlike other data within Beeple, which is represented purely with XML variables, it also added the concept of an ad hoc attachment, meaning you don't have to explicitly say this attachment is sent to this task and this one is sent to that task. There's more of a generic attachments are available to the tasks that are involved in this process at all. So it makes it much simpler for a really common use case of people wanting to use the attachments associated with the process. This spec is a very small spec, because mostly what it does is it refers to the WS-Human Task specification. And what that does is it's kind of odd for people who aren't used to it. It defines services, like web services, that are implemented by a person doing a task in a worklist system. So normally you think of a web service as calling an automated service, some code that is going to respond, and that's represented by Whistle. What WS-Human Task does, it makes so that the work done by a person, whether it's something like approving a loan or approving a hire, these sorts of things, look to the service-oriented architecture as if you were calling a service and then getting back a response. So it standardizes how that's done. It includes things like a lower-level coordination protocol so that you can tell when a task no longer needs to be worked on. It defines roles associated with the task, like there are certain potential owners, there's actual owners, stakeholder, administrators, etc. And it defines a concept of a logical people group. What that means is, instead of when you're creating your business process, instead of saying, go to this group in my LDAP identity system to find out who it's going to be given to, you just, in the process, you just have this logical concept of a loan representative or an administrator or something like that. And then at design time, when you deploy the process, you say, okay, what does that line up to with respect to the actual groups in our system, or possibly query of groups of people in the system. So the way it looks architecturally is that there's the work list. Let's see, first of all, the process design environment is where you create processes and human tasks. You deploy them to a people-for-people server, and actually that in turn deploys something to the WS-Human Task system. When the people-for-people server is running a process, which it might do by the end user kicking off a process, it says, I would like this task done. I'd like this loan approved. It does that by calling a WSDL service that just looks like any other service through this call, this initiating tasks as services. That now means this thing exists in the task system. And how does the task get worked on? It gets worked on because there's an end-user worklist application that is calling through standardized WS-Human Task API to get at information about the task, show it to the user, and give them a UI. So that last thing I was talking about, that this WSHT API that's here, is represented, is what I'm going to show you a little bit more of. So there's all these standard calls to the task system, one of which is called Get My Task, which gets a list of task abstracts, which is just a little bit of information about a bunch of tasks, all the ones that meet the user's criteria, and it's showed on a work list. So I think the easiest way to see this is for me to flip back and forth to my runtime. Just a second, I'm going to say go on that. So in my runtime, this is the end user environment. I'm going to give myself a little bit more space. I'm going to go to all of this user's open tasks. And what I see is a long list where there's the name of the task, which in this demo environment, I only have one kind of task. Some information about that individual task, who owns it, in the case of it's already been claimed, when it was created. This is the kind of thing that you get back from the Get My Task, the kind of summary information about a bunch of tasks. Okay. Next thing is Get Task Details, which gets you the rest of the information associated with an individual task. So that is, if you click on any one of these, it loads all of the loan information and customer information and things associated with the output. So that is task details to fill in this whole middle section of the task. Next thing is getting and setting output. If the person has says, let me claim this first so I can work on it. Good credit. Saving that so that I can come back to it later, or any of these other things, a response code. So this is if I'm going to reject a loan. So I can work on a task. As I'm working on it, it's going to be saving the output that I've worked on so far. And that's this set output. And then, of course, if you come back to it later, you have to get the output that's been worked on so far. Next thing, claim, release, complete, suspend. These are the kinds of things that you put on the buttons up here. So for something I've already claimed, I can complete it, release it, or assign it to somebody else. For something I haven't yet claimed, I have either claim it or assign it to somebody else. These are the kinds of things you get from these buttons. Next thing is getting and setting comments, or getting, adding, or deleting attachments. In our UI, that's at the bottom. At the bottom of each task, there's comments that you can add. There's attachments, place for adding and reviewing attachments. There's a place for getting at the history or at the detail, which might include some sort of completion date that's needed, that sort of thing. So this is the way we've laid out the API into the UI. Now, and that's the screen of it. So what's appropriate for a work list when you're organizing? Now to the main topic of this particular talk. How do you organize your work? What columns should be shown? So in general, when you go to your list of open tasks, you see a mix of all of the different kinds of things that you might need to work on, whether it's loans you're supposed to approve, and employee recruiting you're supposed to work on, expense reports you're supposed to work on. All of these things have different information about them. So when you've got a list of open tasks, there's only a few things you can include in the columns, like the subject of the task, when it was created, who's the current owner, that kind of thing, because that's the sort of thing that can be shown for any kind of task. But often, you'd like to be able to, when you're organizing work, you probably have a bunch of tasks that are of the same type. So, for example, when there is a list for a specific type of task, you'd like to be able to organize your work by some critical information that's in the task itself. So first and last, so let's say there's like for approving loans, it might say the first and last name of the person applying, the loan type, the loan amount. These things don't apply to something like an expense report or employee recruiting. So you can't have columns like that if it's a mix of types. So let me show you how this works. So I was showing you here the list of open tasks. If I go to something like loans waiting to be processed, which is only going to be shown to me because I've logged in as somebody who's a loan representative. So then I see things that are specifically only loan approvals. And because it's only loan approvals, I can show first name, last name, loan type, loan amount, descriptor. I can order by any of these things, like I can get the various loan types, order by last name, order by date created. All of these you can search on very quickly. Also, by having this in your in the summary data, it makes it possible to say, I'm interested in somebody calls me on the phone and wondering about their patio loan. If I can just start typing patio, I see, as I type, the one that has information about a new patio or say kitchen. So the search applies to any of the columns. If I say Jerry, I'll get anything by a guy named Jerry. So that ability to get at these kinds of information, the loan-specific information in the search column, is really valuable for finding stuff quickly. So how is that done? Well, let me get into that next. How do we accomplish these custom properties? Well, we're taking advantage of the WS-Human Task's ability to specify presentation information associated with the task. There's presentation text as well as presentation data. So let me go back to my runtime. I'm going to go to my loan process, and this has something called review loan, right? That's one of that's my people task, people activity. If I go to the definition of that task, it has information about the rendering, which is the form itself. But the stuff that's in the columns, that's shown in the task list, is represented by the presentation. The subject, that's the thing that can only be shown when you've got like open tasks. Everything has a subject. So that's what the subject is. But I can also go in and see loan data that's specific to this loan. This loan summary is interesting because that concatenates a bunch of other things. So I can, if I look at it in the editor, you can see it a little bit more. You can see it's the last name, first name, amount requested. That's how I was able to get, if I flip back to here and I go to open, that's how I could get the fact that in the subject it said, for Lester Smith, $2,000. That was accomplished by a combination of having a parameter called loan summary and then referring to that in the actual summary text with dollar loan summary. But just by including additional parameters and saying where to get those parameters out of the task, that makes it possible for you to get at those parameters in the Get My Tasks API. So let me show you, I mentioned before this API, this Get My Tasks API. This is getting pretty technical, but this is the Web Service Explorer, where you can send SOAP messages into service requests. And I'm doing this because I think it's useful to actually see at an API level the sort of things that are sent. And this times out if you let it hang out for too long, so it might have timed out. But what I've got is a request that says get the task, anything that is a task as opposed to a notification, for potential owners that is ready and that has, and also bring back the properties called loan type and loan amount, right? And then if I was getting pages at a time, like 40 pages, 40 at a time, I can start with 0, or I can start with 41 or 81, etc. But if I go and I'm not timed out, and it looks like I'm not, then I can see, give myself a little bit more space. There we go. All right, let's take a look at the response. What I've got is the response. I've got a total of 15 tasks, total count 15. I've got a bunch of these things called task abstracts, one for each one. Each task abstract. This is where I get things like the ID, the type, the name, potential owners, when it was created, when it was activated. But I also get, and there's that subject, that presentation subject, but I also get near the bottom, push down, this is just the summary information, remember, property values. That's where I see, oh, I asked for loan type, and so this particular instance has a loan type of renovation, and I asked for loan amount, this particular one has a loan amount of $7,500. So that's, if you were creating your own API, how you would, excuse me, your own UI, that's how you would get at this information, and then you'd have your own approach to creating columns. Within ActiveVOS Central, we've got a mechanism for adding new lists. So this is like the loans waiting to be processed list. That the way that this list of lists is a simple configuration file that's deployed into ActiveVOS Central. And what I can see is this one, where what all I have to do is say, ask for certain task columns. The ones prefixed with task dot are out of the standard, but anything that is just a simple name is assumed to be one of your presentation parameters. So we have what presentation parameter to go and get, and what label should be put at the top. And then this is saying, and then here is what says how to go find the appropriate task. This is basically the API call, that same API call that I showed a minute ago using SOAP. That's the contents of it are embedded right inside of the configuration file. So this is saying I'm looking for potential owners, it's ready, and the task type has to be an approved task. Or for unclaimed mortgage loans, I can say, again, a similar list of things to show in columns, that it also, and the loan type has to be mortgage. Given this thing, I can go and see mortgage loans, right? And that will say these are just the ones that are asking for mortgage loans. If it's pretty easy to change this. In fact, you can even change it at runtime by going to that same configuration file in our runtime environment and say, well, maybe I don't want to see mortgages. I'll have personal loans. I think that's what it's. Yeah, but personal or auto. I'm pretty sure I have a couple of things in there that are. Let me take a look at what sort of loans I have. I've got some things that are, I've got a couple auto loans. I know that will hit something. Let me make those auto. And then I'll show it with a task, with a category saying auto loans. Then if I just update that, the one thing I have to do is, in order to change the list I'm seeing here, I have to actually log out. So the next time this user logs in, I go and see, instead of mortgage loans, I'm seeing auto loans. And these are the new car, et cetera, Mercedes. So that's the way I get at different kinds of loans, is based on that where clause. There's also loans I'm reviewing. This is a set of things that are different because the status was, instead of the status being I don't care, the status is I've already claimed it, which is called reserved. Or in the case of processed loans, these are the things that are already completed. These are differences in status. The only change for these things is just what's in this column here. I can get things that I've claimed by having, instead of potential owners, I can have that I actually own. It really makes for a very customizable list. It's easy to update. It's easy to update, but still you're not going to tell your end users, oh, everybody gets to go out and create their own thing. Because it's working with XML, working with an API, it'll be more along the lines of somebody saying, I want all of my loan representatives to see these kinds of lists. That will be the most helpful to them. A developer taking literally 5 minutes to say, oh, okay, I can add that list. And the next time any loan representative logs in, they now see that specialized kind of list. That's the kind of pattern we expect as far as who's doing what in this whole thing. So that's some of the capabilities for this kind of human task-based worklist system for organizing and searching tasks. John?
Thanks, Michael. The next step here would be now we'd solicit your questions in the questions box that we pointed out before. As I've mentioned in the past, this can be oftentimes the most valuable part of the webinar. So let's get started. The first question is those functions you are mentioning, like get task details, are specific of an ActiveVOS API, or is it standardized in the People for People or a WSHT standard?
It's in the WS-Human Task spec. So almost everything we've got, all of the operations, including get my tasks, get task details, etc., are standardized. There were a couple of things where we noticed an opportunity to provide more capabilities. We added a couple extra operations to a separate API, but most of your work you can, and if it's important to you, you really can do everything you really want to do through just the standard APIs, like get task details.
You may have already answered this, but the related question was, I've never heard of WSHT before. It's new to me, so that's the reason why I asked.
All right, yeah, and I can see a lot of people. It is brand new. Just in August, the spec was approved. All of you can see though the list of companies behind it, with Oracle, SAP, TIBCO, and IBM all behind this spec. This is something that it will be valuable to be aware of in the future.
Very good. Additional questions? One for you, Michael, would be just if you could clarify. You mentioned that there's a list of columns that you can have on the task list. But I wasn't sure. Are they customizable? Can you add columns to that task list?
Yeah. So what you do is you can add columns, but you typically add columns to a list that is specific to one kind of task that's going to be in it. So so if you're looking at all your open tasks, then you'll probably just go with the standard list of columns because it's a whole wide variety of things in there. When you're just limiting it to my expense tasks, then you're going to want to see details like the expense amount or loan task, the loan type. Those are custom columns that you create through this customization that I showed. It is possible that if you've got tasks that don't have a value, it's not appropriate, you can put in a column even when some of the task instances that doesn't make any sense for them, and it'll just remain blank for them. If you don't have to make sure that it has a value for every column.
Got it. Another question here is, can you show how one could develop a report for management to show how statistics for productivity per worker, time to claim, and process tasks, etc.?
Yes, those in our in the end user environment. In addition to seeing your task lists, there are two other main tabs which I didn't concentrate on today. One of them is called requests for kicking off new processes, and the other one's called reports. Those reports include how long things are taking to get done, who's got too many outstanding tasks, when things need to be escalated. It's just a wide variety of reports that are customized. There's some reports that come out of the box, but it's a customizable set of things that you can look into for that.
Very good. Other questions from the audience? Please submit them now. Additional questions, anyone? Okay. Let me see what we have here. Well, in terms of wrap-up, we want to thank you for joining us. Again, want to mention that this is a series done on a weekly basis on Tuesdays. You can register for archives if you know someone that's interested. You can send us comments at ctotactivos.com, download replays, and also check out our website at activos.com or email either myself or Michael. So again, want to thank you for attending and hope to see you next Tuesday.